Hi everybody, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast this week. My name is Faz.
And I'm Rich.
We are very excited this week because we won't be spending as much time talking about our PSPs and PS Vitas and games on there. Not that we don't enjoy doing that, that's the whole point of the pod, but we're also going to get into some deeper subjects that we have been thinking about for a little while. So this week we're going to be looking at how we learn about games or how we learn to play games. It's something that is, I guess, a very strange subject nowadays compared to what it used to be even 10 years ago.
Oh,
maybe.
You sound so old.
Well, yeah,
when
I am.
I were a lad.
Yeah. Well, but it is though. It's true. Like, as in, I am getting old. I guess, especially in gaming years. Like, what was my first? I think I said on the first pod, a Spectrum. When I was like 5, was my first earliest memory of a gaming console in my house. And how did I ever learn to play a game at that age? When I look at my son, who's 5, and look how he's trying to develop and learn games, more and more I'm having to describe to him how to do something. There's no manual anymore. I have to tell him and teach him on the fly during the game to be able to do that. And I guess that's something we want to talk about, really.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, did you have someone to sort of take you under their wing and show you the ropes? Or
I don't know.
No.
Does it, like, being beaten badly by my sister, does that count?
I think it counts. I think it counts. Like, I think there's something to be said for, like, because I know we said about we have this conversation and mull it over a little bit. And so obviously I kind of gravitated towards two things. I say obviously, like, who the fuck's going to know obviously? I gravitate towards two things. First was like arcade stuff. And obviously if you're in an arcade, you've got attract sequences that will quite often tell you, press this button to press this, press this button to do
Press
this.
this to do this, to do that.
Or you've got the some of the, say for fighting games, you might have special moves on a little printout card, like on the board in front of you and stuff like that. But ultimately what you're doing is easier to get to grips with anyway, in theory. You've got fewer buttons to mess with and things like that. The other thing that I immediately thought of was at the other end of the scale. And one of the things that I read most back in the day was my manual for Baldur's Gate.
That's
like 150 odd pages, I
Yeah.
think. And it was basically like reading a Dungeons and Dragons source book years before I got to playing Dungeons and Dragons in quote unquote real life, which I know is ridiculous for Dungeons and Dragons, but you know what I mean, right?
That is real.
Yeah, it's real imaginary stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's one of those things that if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to learn how to play the game. And there are quite a few things. I mean, I was crap at it, so I guess I didn't really learn how to play it. But nonetheless, I stood a better chance.
That manual's terrible, clearly.
It was, well...
It needs them.
I definitely spent more time reading the manual than playing the game. I know that much. But there was a couple of other bits, collecting for the Mega Drive that I think it was Starflight or something like that, like another big RPG exploration thing, where if you don't have the manual, you've got absolutely no idea what's going on. And it's going to be luck or judgment, or, like you say, playing a game where someone is battering you and you have to learn. Which brings me back around to the arcade stuff. I think there is definitely something to be said for just going in, failing well, because you take something from it.
Yeah.
And nowadays, there's a lot more emphasis on tutorials, and I don't want to say hand-holding, because that sounds kind of dismissive.
Handheld hand-holding.
Yeah, something like that. And I mean, like Fiona was saying in the other episode about Civilization, the tutorial for that on the Vita left a lot to be desired, but there was no information in the manual. So it's like, well, how do I learn how to play this? Well, yeah, if you haven't got someone to teach you, like you're doing with your kids, what do you do?
Yeah. So let's start there, because before we get totally deep into that conversation, I want to ask you about how your bank holiday weekend has been. So it's Easter bank holiday weekend here in the UK. How was your bank holiday weekend? Because I want to talk to you about what is currently in front of me, which is
your guidebook and your PSP.
No, but I want to talk about that.
Honeybadger.
I want to talk about the Honeybadger.
You want to talk about the Honeybadger. We went over to the Horsforth Beer Festival. And in fact, I've got some props. Clang props and a really heavy glass. we discovered a little place called DMC Brewery, and I think they're based over sort of Wakefield, Morley kind of way. Do a lot of ginger beers and like mead beers. And, you know, I say we. Fiona started chatting to the guy, and because, you know, serving interesting things. And they have like a cider mead and what's called an Imperial Braggot, a mead beer. And long story short, he said that he does a lot of bar running for historical reenactments in the Midlands, and invented the Honeybadger, which is basically a snake bite with mead-based cider and beer.
That's sensational.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
It's lethal.
I'm having a great time already.
And I'm already talking absolute rubbish. But yeah, like, shout out to DMC. Thank you.
I guess. For everything.
Thank you for your efforts.
I just read on the side of the can there, ingredients in the cider one, apple and honey.
Yes, exactly.
If you think about it from that point of view, that is sensational that something with two basic ingredients tastes so good and can get me drunk.
Yeah, it's simple but 6% ABV effective. So well done there.
So this might be a fun pod.
It might go all over the place.
It already has. Thank you for asking how mine was. Mine was fine, thank you. No, that's okay. This is how this
Arcade
works.
Club, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I wanted to come to. I didn't really want to ask you about it. No, I did. I wanted to come to that. I went with my son to the arcade club in Leeds today, and there are 3 branches of arcade club. One in Leeds, one in Bury, and one in Blackpool. And I've not been to the Blackpool one yet. But
No.
if you live in the north of England, anywhere actually, we compel you to try out the arcade club, and we will definitely be doing a full podcast on an arcade club visit at some point. But I guess we just wanted at this point just to point out that it is there and it is fantastic. And going back to the point of learning how to play games, being able to spend some real concerted time with my son who's 5 and get him to come out of his comfort zone in such a busy environment playing video games. It was a wonderful day for me.
Yeah,
It sounds
I
really
bet.
oh god. But it was it emotional? Maybe a little bit.
I could see how it could have been.
Yeah, I mean, we've been to arcade club before. Been with friends, been with family. I've been with Oscar before, but with other family members, and it's a bit frantic, especially when trying to keep hold of people in there, and there's a lot going on. When it was just us, and he's a little bit older now than he was last time, trying to integrate him with different parts of the gaming world that he's never experienced before was fantastic. So to give an example, his favourite game, which this is why I do this podcast with Rich, is called Ketsui, and I didn't.
Such a good choice.
It did not have a title in English on this game. And what kind of cabinet is it on? Sorry.
So it's on an Astro City, one of Sega's ones that you could swap the boards in and out.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, if you were trying to Google it,
I was googling Astro City, and it was like, oh, you just buy the cabinet, and I was like, which games can you get for Astro City? And it was like numerous games.
There's options.
English and Japanese, and it wasn't until I texted you to say we're playing this really cool game, and I kind of half expected you to be able to tell me. I won't lie, and I was really chuffed when you did. So, but yeah, playing on that and just seeing him develop from even in the day to day to go from I just want to play Mario Kart because that's what I'm comfortable with, to go from that, and don't get me wrong, we fucking love Mario Kart in our family, and it's just brilliant. To go from that and being able to play a Japanese game on an old arcade cabinet and sit there for a good part of an hour doing that, and seeing him develop into having this joyful glee of shooting constantly. Everything, yeah. And just like, and at one point he took the lead. He was just like, Daddy, do this. Daddy, do that. And I'm like, excellent. Oh, will do. You know, like, yeah, why not? This is brilliant. But then also on the flip side of that, there was the Luigi Mansion cabinet, which you actually get into.
I've still never been able to get on that. It's always really busy.
We went in immediately. I saw there was people already in there, but they were just coming out, so we just dived straight in.
Nice.
And I was a bit like, oh, he might be a bit worried about this because it's completely different for him, and it was there the very first minute we got there. And it's like you get in, it's a curtained cabinet, but when you pick up the controller, which is an actual Suckatron. So and it's got like 3 buttons, and it feels like you're playing. You are a Ghostbuster.
It's intuitive.
Yeah, wonderful. Like, and he didn't mind it. He was getting absolutely hammered by these ghosts and things. And I was just kind of over his shoulder helping him out and stuff. It was just sensational to be able to see him experience something like that and something so tactile.
Yeah, I think tactile counts for a lot, and being intuitive. And I think this is why part of me, arcade gaming speaks to me on a very core level. Like, I've got sticks downstairs for like playing on the PS4 or whatever, and I like that tactile feeling of chunky buttons, a stick you can little click when you wiggle it, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you go to Arcade Club or wherever, and say you find a Time Crisis machine, and you pick up a light gun. If you've ever seen a film, you know how to use that light gun.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and there's almost something universal about it. But even then, Time Crisis, all it's got to teach you is, okay, well, you push the pedal and you let go of the pedal and you're in and out of cover. The rest of it, you can probably work out.
Still hard though. Still not easy to
bastard hard.
Hard
Seriously,
to
fuck Time Crisis.
The amount of times that you like, I've got my head down with the pedal, you pop your head up a shot, and you're like, that's one of my 4 lives, you shit. Like, isn't like, and you're just a general grunt. You are just a general grunt. Get out of my way. Like, you are not what I'm here for.
But that's exactly it. And it's one of those things that, like, especially with arcade gaming, for all of its like intuitive, you can wade in, you can learn it like that. And I mean, how old's your son? Did you say 5?
5, yeah.
He was able to start learning Ketsui, right?
Yeah.
And that's from sitting there, working out what's going on. The component parts are very, very simple. But believe me, especially with Ketsui, the mechanical depth to it is ridiculous, right? And there is something brilliant about how arcade games take that sort of simple but effective gameplay, let you learn it nice and easy, and then come stage 3, or maybe even earlier, depending on what you're playing, it is battering you. And if you haven't learnt it by that point...
I don't think we quite got there. I think we were still like level 3, and it was like, oh, this is a little bit harder, and it's like, oh, actually, this is probably like, there's probably 100 levels to this.
I think there's only 5.
Oh, really?
Also, well, there might be 2 loops. But it's the sort of thing that traditionally, especially with that developers... games, stage 3 is usually the point where it's like, okay, you need to learn
Step up, yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I think, a good design ethos to me. That is good game design. It's where it's easy to pick up and play, but there is a lot to learn. And I think, especially with console gaming, nowadays, there's that kind of AAA narrative drive wanting to be kind of like movies a lot of the time and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of tutorializing as you go through. A lot of tooltips will pop up to kind of guide you around, like, hey, you've got skill points you need to use and stuff like that. And it's almost kind of drip feeding these extra bits and bobs as you go. And the start of the game will generally try and guide you through gently. But I think there was definitely a period, call it, and this is going to be woefully inaccurate, but call it the PS2 era, right? Where games were starting to get a bit more sophisticated, but hadn't quite got to the point where they're like, shit, we need to make sure there's a good tutorial on board from the start. And that's where you get to the stage where it's like, well, does it have a manual? Okay, at the time it might have, but if you're buying it from CEX, SEX, KEX, whatever, now, then you're shit out of luck. But it's the sort of thing that, you are going to learn that game the hard way unless you start picking up guidebooks or looking online or what have you. And that's before you even get into the realms of, well, some of these games might have been made to force you to get the guidebook.
Yeah.
And there were a few of those. I think there are a couple of Final Fantasies that people have always pointed the finger at and gone, oh, yeah, that was just for the guidebooks. Or, if you're importing or something like that, like my Japanese is woeful and it's non-existent.
Mine is not better.
But
Ketsui?
But nowadays, you can get like, you can point your phone at it, you can get it to translate text on screen, and you'll be able to at least navigate the menus. Back in the day, I've mentioned before about importing something from Japan for my GameCube. I had to go on Game FAQs or Game Facts or whatever it is, and get like a menu list before I could even get into the game to learn how to play it. So it's one of those things that there's always been a bunch of ways to learn how to play a game.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you've got to go in and just fail at it. Look at Lion King.
Let's not look at Lion
Let's
King.
not look
Not
at
right
Lion
now,
King. No.
especially for drinking.
It's a different day.
Yeah, that's a full season of the podcast, but potentially. Like,
Just half an hour of me chanting, fuck the ostriches, fuck the giraffes, and fuck the fucking trees.
Monkeys, they're so mean. Like, never turn around when you want them to. Interesting point that you made there about the translation of games, and again, I'll bring it back to Arcade Club today. And as I said before in the pod, we will come back and do a whole pod on the whole of Arcade Club and our favourite cabinets and stuff like that. That'll be great, and it'll be really fun to go in there, maybe do like a few live bits while we're doing stuff. But for example, most of the bottom floor of the Leeds branch is what I describe as foreign games, really, and most of it are Japanese and not translated either. So you just have to go in there and have a chance at it. There's one game where you flip a table, I believe it is, and it's a physical table attached to the actual cabinet, and you throw the table, and it's different scenarios where you're in a posh restaurant and you flip the table and you have to see how many glasses you can smash, or you have to see how far you can throw it on like a track and field arena. It's just crazy, but you don't need any instructions for that. You kind of see the table and go, I can see what I need to do here. I'll learn it on the fly, and I will still have a fantastic time. And we went in today and we couldn't actually get on that machine because there were so many families and I could see people, and it was always a parent, and I'd say today I saw maybe 3 different types of families in there, and the type of family specifically going to those kind of machines was a parent with a 5 or 6 year old just having a fun time. And all the teenagers were on all the Japanese dance mats that you don't need to know the instructions for because you've seen it in a movie, like you say, or you've seen it somewhere else, or your parents told you about it, or your bigger brother's got a PS2 still with Dance Mat Revolution kicking around somewhere in the loft, and they've got it out one time at Christmas, and drunk auntie had a little go in it or something. That happens, and that's how you learn about past video games and how you learn maybe about what other things are out there.
Yeah, and I think increasingly, certainly, from when I was a kid, I didn't have, an older person who was versed in video games to show me the ropes. And I can see how, like, with my nephews, and I'm sure you're getting with your kids, like you were just saying, like, we're going to get to the stage where it's like, hey, this is what I played when I was your age. Here's how you fail at it. Don't do this.
Yeah, look at me suck at this.
But like things like in fact, the one that keeps coming back to mind for me is Street Fighter. I wish someone had taught me Street Fighter, right? And I had to. Well, I made a point. This is probably getting on for a few years ago now. Like, I've always liked fighting games, right? One of my earliest sort of proper vivid video gaming memories, and I mean like etched onto my soul kind of vivid, is we were on a family holiday and we'd gone to Ibiza because, I don't know, cheap flights or something, and in like this little rec room that had like this knackered pool table in the corner was a cabinet that I distinctly recall this guy sort of hopping up and down and then firing this blue energy out of the screen, and it was fucking awesome. And it took me years afterwards to track down that it was one of the versions of Street Fighter 2.
Okay.
And so I'd always kind of, had this draw to it. There was just something about the artwork and the movement that grabbed me, Fast forward however many years, and, I want to play it and play it well. Mm-hmm. I cannot play it well. I am awful at fighting games, but like I picked up a couple and I thought, you know what? Like I'm gonna make a point of learning one of these things. And I think I went with Mortal Kombat X to start with. Because I mean prior to that I picked up Mortal Kombat 9 on the Vita, and mucked about with it, but didn't really gel with it too much. And I thought, no, you know what? I'm gonna make a concerted effort. And that was when I started to appreciate a good training mode. And not necessarily one to go through a tutorial, though it can do, but to just let you get in and muck about with the game. And I ended up watching a lot of YouTube, like instructional videos, basically, for just how to do basic stuff. And start to learn things like the importance of frame data or how to, get out of neutral or all this kind of terminology that ultimately doesn't necessarily matter in the sort of moment-to-moment gameplay, but is nonetheless what the community at large uses to inform other people. Yeah. So it's almost like learning the language before you can start to learn how to play it, so that you know where the terminology goes. And it was also a lot of the terminology that was in guidebooks for things like Street Fighter 2 and things like that. And so over time, I was starting to pick up the skills, and then you start to practice the execution. It's like, oh, finally I can, on Street Fighter 2, I can finally throw a fireball and stuff like that. And it's one of those things that it's a long process, but at the same time, you can go to an arcade, you can sit there, and you can muck about with it, and it'll be great. But at the same time, if you go in and you've learnt some basics, either through blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of money spent in an arcade, or nowadays putting in the time, you can have an even better time, and you can go to Arcade Club and beat a total stranger, which is great. That was one of my finest moments in Arcade Club, was like, going 3-1 against a total stranger downstairs on, the Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. And it was great just to sort of go around the other side and be like, oh, hey, was that you playing just then? Like, that last round was really, really good. And he looked at me and went, oh, sorry, was that you?
It was so meaningless to him, but so meaningful
utterly
to you.
meaningless to him. But I really got something out of it. And I think there was probably a compliment there where it was like, oh yeah, he's just fighting the same character over again on the computer. But he clearly had no idea what he was doing.
Yeah.
But I would like to think he was having fun.
Let's hope so. Let's move it back. You're speaking to me here because I've just had a vivid memory of my own, where talking the same sort of thing, where one of my friends, I used to play Fight Night Round 2 on the PS2, and I had a steadfast refusal to learn that game properly. I owned the game, but I used to take it around to my friend's house, and we used to play for hours, and he learned the game and learned what you should do on the game, and he won every single time. And I was just like, I was accepting of it. I was like, I'm not going to learn this game. I refuse to learn how to fight properly.
Just going to spin the analog sticks and make them flail around.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to haymaker constantly, because that's surely going to win. And I just kept on fighting against this guy and kept losing and kept losing. I don't think I ever beat him, but I was having fun, so it didn't bother me at all. But it just shows you that actually, because he'd taken the time to probably spend 3 or 4 hours actually learning what to do, he could win, whereas I could never win. And I just was so stubborn, and still am, but certainly was in my teenage years, where I was like, well, I don't give a shit, mate, you might win, but I didn't have to learn it. Like,
but that's the thing, is like, because you were still having fun though.
What's it matter?
Exactly. What does it matter? And I think, to go back to the Lion King, if you haven't learned that you need to, duck a little bit early under the trees or whatever on stage 2 to get past them, is there a point where you have to learn the game in order to not be frustrated by it when it starts kicking your teeth in?
Yeah.
It's one of those ones that, especially with RPGs, if you haven't learned the mechanics, I think Fiona was saying last time about Final Fantasy VIII, and I'm not saying she didn't learn how to play the game, but you get to a point where you're starting to bump your head against a boss or something like that. Certainly I've had that with Final Fantasies, where I haven't learned the mechanics well enough to get past someone. Do you ever find that? Do you ever find that you start getting frustrated by stuff because you've not sort of invested the time somehow?
Yeah, his name was Blue, and it was Fight Night Round 2. And well done, Blue. I guess that there's a lot of games that I try and cut corners on, probably. I'm trying to think of an example. One will come to me soon, I'm sure. But where you do kind of think, oh, I'm just in it for the enjoyment, but I do want to complete the game, but I don't want to have to go to the nth degree to make that happen. And that's probably that's probably just speaks about my personality, really. I'm just like, I'm just in it for the fun, and actually when it gets hard, I'll probably just quit it and go, well, I nearly did it.
I tried.
Yeah. And I spoke about the last episode where I just used someone else's save for Final Fantasy IX. It's like, I'd rather just take the easy route and have a good time doing it. Really, the Bart Simpson sort of ethos of the world. So, talking about, you spoke about a few different methods of learning games, and I'm really interested because as a gamer, speaking to you, you've got such an in-depth knowledge of arcade games, and you talk about how they feel intuitive and how you learn those, and then obviously talked about as well tutorial videos that you use there for Street Fighter. We've got a couple of things in front of us, actually, a couple of props, like we said, apart from the amazing rocket fuel booze. So I bought a rough guide to the PSP recently,
this yet.
and it would cost me a couple of quid. It came off eBay, as all of my PSP paraphernalia do, and you can see, if you follow us on Instagram, you can see my collection at the moment. I've put that up this week. of all the things that I bought, and I said, you know, everything that I had there cost us the value of it was a value pack, sorry, of a PSP 18 years ago. And yeah, so I bought this off eBay, same sort of thing. And it's a bit of a funny guide, really, because it's very personal to them. So they talk about all the technical things of a PSP and how it works, but also they go into hacking a PSP, and they go into what they like about the PSP and what they don't. On the last page, actually, funnily enough, I just flicked to it on the walk over. Top 25 video games of all time.
Yeah.
They've got their own list in there.
Yeah.
And I don't even... Go on, list me what's number 18?
Number 18 is NBA Jam.
No, I have... Yeah, I have heard a lot of good things about NBA Jam. I tried to find it in Arcade Club today, but I couldn't find it. Maybe
I got it on Mega Drive downstairs. We'll muck about with it at some point. But like...
This is why I like it.
It's great.
Yeah.
Top 25 greatest of all time, though.
I know. I think Myst. I did see the start of the list, and Myst is number 3, I think, wasn't it? But number 1, Battletoads. I played that today for the very first time on the arcade cabinet, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Is it the
greatest video game of all time?
I mean, I was having a lot of fun kicking big pigs' ass off the screen, but.
I feel like this is a talking point of an episode in itself.
Yeah, okay, so maybe leave that page alone. But
because I've got some notes.
put the book down.
But I tell you what, no, I mean like there's some nice touches with this, because like on the back cover, you've kind of got a almost like a kind of exploded diagram of the menu system for the PSP.
It's great, isn't it?
But like what strikes me flicking through this is every single game guide or anything like that I've ever sort of got my hands on, including ones that were on the front of magazines. I've still got my Soul Calibur 2 one from NGC magazine.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's really good.
Yes.
It's really good. I went out of my way to buy like a Tekken 3 one, hoping it would be as good, and it's not. It's not as good. But they have a lot more like imagery in them. Like they're there to grab you. This is very text heavy. This feels like almost like a technical manual.
Yeah, and I think it is. And that, so for example, that wasn't something that I would have picked up anytime. I only picked that up because of this podcast and project that we're doing. But I was interested when I was reading it, because, like you say, it is very technical. But they speak to you in a very colloquial way. It's very.
It's accessible.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's very easy going, and it's quite nice to read through that. So I kind of read a couple of pages every night and just kind of, sort of see what people are saying about the PSP. And I can't remember the book's from. It probably obviously saying there somewhere, but I found it interesting to pick that up, and it's so different from a gaming guide from Prima, for example.
Yeah,
Prima. Would it be?
Well, I always went Prima, but I've been wrong.
Now
demonstrably wrong.
It would make sense to be a Prima, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because it's a primer for how to. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I'm gonna now flip it to Primer.
Nice. Yeah.
Thanks. So they were famous, I guess, really for pumping out game guides.
They do good maps as well.
Yeah. So
first-person shooters, those maps would be really handy back in the day.
And the guides now are worth. It depends on which ones you've got and things, but the old guides are worth a little bit of money now.
Some of them.
Yeah. Not tons, but I know my Pokemon Yellow one, for example. I think it looks like it sells for about £50 on eBay.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And it's like, that would have cost me £15 back in the day, I guess, probably. But I mean, it's probably in like, it's not in battered condition, but it's certainly.
Well, it's been thumbed.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they've closed down actually, which is sad. But they closed down in 2019. I was reading an article the other day, and I was just when I was looking up researching for this pod, but they were a great way to. And maybe not learn a game necessarily, but certainly to aid you in a walkthrough when you needed help before Google.
Yeah, and I think, I've got two things on that. So first of all, before I forget, this PlayStation Portable Rough Guide, 2006.
Oh wow! Right, okay, so that just came out when PSP came out.
Of the time,
yeah,
definitely.
It felt like it was written a bit later, because certainly it's got information in there about hacking your PSP, which I would have thought was probably a later concept.
Well, what's quite interesting as well is they've got like the breakdown of UMD games and stuff like that in here as well, which surely 2006 they were probably still releasing right?
Yeah, it must be.
Launch ones or something.
Yeah, maybe.
But have you learnt something from this guide? Was the first part of what I was coming back to?
In terms of how to play a game or how to use the PSP or anything?
Either.
Not particularly. Like, there's nothing. I think the console isn't in depth enough to feel like you can't
There's
mess
not like
around.
a secret something or another.
No, not particularly. There's a few little technical bits here and there, but there was nothing. I guess I just started to learn more about what you could do if you were going to mod it. But also, I guess it is interesting to have that kind of paraphernalia around your handheld and feel like you know it inside out through someone else's eyes as well, rather than you just finding out about it.
I've just realised they've plugged the Pirate Bay website. Didn't that infamously get shut down?
Yeah.
So an ISO hunt as well. I'm pretty sure that one went as well. This is it's proper like getting into piracy,
which
like
is
torrent
interesting.
sites and stuff. Yeah. But I'm glad you mentioned about having the kind of paraphernalia, because that was the other point I was coming back to. Following the primer guides. So I think nowadays. Wait, let me form this thought a bit better. So back in the day, you could get guides in magazines and stuff like that, right? You know, you buy your monthly GameCube magazine or whatever, and there'd be something in there. And then you obviously have the kind of the fuller fat primer guides. I have a Dark Souls one that is like a kind of hardback, almost like collector's edition type thing.
Oh, that sounds nice.
That sits somewhere between guide and art book.
Yeah.
And so I do think what you're saying about having something nice in terms of paraphernalia to go with the thing, if you're a fan of that thing, I think that might be where the game guide nowadays kind of sits. And I think it's a good fit. Because I've tracked, like I've gone out of my way to track down guides online for old games because I like the game. So I think you're onto something.
I won't lie, I salivated when you just described that Dark Souls manual. That sounds sensational because I feel like you've hit the nail on the head there, where you've said it's a collector's item. People want to have it around, and it's almost, it completes the game in a way, in so much that it's like, you know, you may have an amazing game and you'll have a fantastic time playing it, and you might be a person that never sees that game guide, but when you're sat there at home and you know you've got that, and you know it's of great quality, it's almost like having, you know, what they call them, like coffee table books, isn't it?
Yeah,
and you're like,
almost.
You know, and you know, you can flick through it whenever you want, and like you say, it's artwork. That sounds brilliant.
Yeah, and I think what's also telling about it is the other reason why you can see why that sort of guide has, depending on how you look at it, either died a death or become a niche item. Because they make a point of saying that because of patching, some of the details could be out of date. And as soon as you've got stats and things like that,
never thought about that.
Yeah, exactly. Suddenly these things could become quite outdated quite quickly. And you know, there might be, again, for fighting games, you know, it might say about a combo that if you've got a guide for something nowadays, it might be relevant 1 month, and then, you know, a couple of months down the line.
Think about it like that.
Yeah.
You know, the Lion King DLC. That guy's not relevant anymore. Just when we were about to pump that one out.
Guys, pause the print run.
Another thing we've got in front of us, we've got two different things. One we're going to save for another day, but we are going to trail, is a PlayStation Magazine demo disc, number 45. I got this off eBay, £2. I have no idea what is on this disc. It just came in I guess a cereal box.
Just bought
worth
blind.
of cardboard. Yeah, bought it blind, and I've refused to Google what is on there.
I'm excited.
I know. So we're going to play that after the pod today and see what's on there, and we'll probably have a little chat about demo discs at some of the time. Because whilst it is a way of learning about games, is it? You wouldn't. Well, maybe you would. I mean, I remember a specific demo disc I don't want to talk about right now. Again, ruining the pod. But where I probably learned through doing the first level over and over again how to play that game, and then bought that game and aced that game, and I was like, this is my game, and it probably was from the demo disc. So I guess it is a method of learning, but we'll save that for another time, I think.
Yeah, I've got fond memories of a demo disc that my sister had as well that we'll get into.
Yeah. And also demos, you know, they haven't gone away. They're still there digitally now, and actually the Switch has loads of demos on it. They, you know, I think they're always advertising, you know, you can get 700 demos and stuff, and it's like, well, you know, but I don't really play that many digital demos nowadays.
No, it's one of those things that I've kind of moved away from. I think there's been a couple recently, but Yeah, I think I'm much more likely to just impulse buy and regret it later.
Just pay all the money. It's fine.
Yeah, that's bad, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's what I do too. That's why we're here in this therapy session that we're hosting every single week for each other.
Talking of therapy, shall I do Call of Duty?
Okay, yeah, let's take a little break from learning games and let's talk about this game.
Yeah.
That I feel, maybe do I need to nurse you afterwards?
No, I think this will be a learning process. This will be a cathartic.
This is a learning.
Yeah, I wrote notes. I promise I wrote notes. I've left them downstairs because I thought, you know what, I'll remember the important bits.
They make me angry.
Yeah, I'll burn them when I'm done. So, Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified on the PS Vita. It's another really long title, so henceforth I will refer to it as COD BLOPS. You see, this, dear internet, when you abbreviate something, it sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. Anyway, so I have a soft spot for the Black Ops games. Like, back in the day, I played a lot of Modern Warfare, and enjoyed myself. A lot of fond memories of playing with friends. But over the years, Black Ops and the various ones that came after it, with the exception of like Black Ops 4, or I think that was the one that was basically multiplayer only.
Yeah.
I've always gone back to, like, they're the subset of Call of Duty games that I've spent the most time with over the years. And I like the stories. I like the single player content. They have the like good bot matches, which is always a plus point as far as I'm concerned, and have been since Unreal Tournament in 1999. And I will fight anybody that says otherwise.
I will bot fight anybody.
I will bot fight anyone.
Come on a bot fight with me. Let's go.
But like, there's lots of content for a single player, right? Which I always appreciate. Now, on the Vita, the game, according to Metacritic, is like when they take the critics' numbers was when I looked last.
Still is. I checked.
Still is.
Yep.
The lowest rated PS Vita game. If you compare that with the user scores, the users are a little bit more forgiving of it. And I had a quick look, and like there are some people scoring it like 9, 10, things like that, and saying that they had really good fun with it. Full disclosure, I've not played the multiplayer on this, so that may or may not colour things for anybody listening who might rush out and buy a Vita and Call of Duty.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I mean, I saw on our Instagram somebody that started following us has just picked up a Vita on the 17th of March. Nice. So
well done.
Perchance we might advise him to do that today or not do that. Maybe.
Well, we shall see. So the game, by virtue of being handheld, is obviously stripped back from the sort of full fat console versions. I think it was made by a slightly different studio to the normal set, and that shows. Like there was one of the critic reviews basically said that it's almost like someone's copied a masterpiece, but they've just traced the outline, and I think that rings quite true for me. So you've got the multiplayer. You've got a mode that's I think it was called Hostiles, which is basically like a kind of wave-based horde mode. I think there's like 5 maps you have to go through and unlock them.
It's cool that you've got that on there, though. Like you say, even a stripped back experience, they've got a different mode.
You've got
there. And
variations on a theme.
A familiar Call of Duty sort of, not zombie sort of thing, but
but it's kind of close. I think it was kind of a bit closer to what you might find in like the kind of Spec Ops modes on some of the Modern Warfare ones. You also have a sort of quote unquote campaign story mode, and like what they call time trials. So I'll start there. On a lot of Call of Duties, there's this sort of tutorial mode to go back to learning a game.
Yeah.
They would drop you into like a kind of mocked up kill house type thing where you'd have cardboard cutouts that you have to run around and shoot, and it's timed and all that kind of stuff. They basically took that and made like 5 different runs of that. As a not insignificant part of the single player experience.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And one of them, they make a point of, you have in fact, no, I think on all of them, they have the kind of announcer who's or instructor who's watching you, go through and like, use your knife, or like, clear the room with a grenade, and all that kind of stuff. And it never goes well, like ever. Like there's more than once where, there might be a cardboard cutout of a terrorist hiding behind a barrel for like no reason whatsoever, and you can't move on or rather you can move on, but there won't be any more targets until you've found it. Oh. So, you're like on the clock, you've got to look back and be like, okay, like hunting behind every cupboard to find someone.
That is the worst part of any game when that happens.
Yeah,
it stresses me out so much because you think it's so insignificant. Let me progress. That is, what does it matter if I've missed this one thing?
Exactly. Yeah, and it was some dubious signposting. Let's say that. There's also like I think there was a point because it makes you do one before you get into the campaign, and there was a point where they get to the like use your knife bit. And I'm pressing the touchpad for my melee, and I'm swinging the knife, and I just haven't judged the distance right.
Okay.
And that is a pretty significant part of a game based around combat, is you've got to be able to judge space. And if that's not going to happen, the rest of it is going to go a little bit sideways. And there are also a couple of other like early red flags around, movement and trying to get through doors and things like that, and getting a little bit stuck on some geometry that I shouldn't have been. Like I've never seen a big burly soldier get stuck on a door frame, but I have now. So, you have those bits. The hostiles mode was where I say I got the kind of bulk of my play.
Okay.
In the end,
yeah,
because it's wave based, it felt almost more arcadey. You can go in, you can kind of learn some mechanics, but again, some pretty big red flags. Like, oh, you finish this wave, you can get a care package, but if you can't get there within about 8 seconds before the 10 seconds that the first wave or the next wave turns up, we're going to take that away from you, even if you're halfway through capturing the item. And even then, it's completely random, so it might be something awful.
Yeah.
And even then, you survive a couple of waves, and it gets to the point where some of the AI veers violently between psychic and dumb as a post. Like I've seen enemies run past me to take cover behind me. I've seen enemies start shooting at a wall before I've rounded a corner, so that they could headshot me as I come round the corner and things like that. So when I went to the campaign, it's very stripped back. It's very to the point. It's very. We've got these characters from COD BLOPS, the real ones, and here's what's going to fill in the gaps between two of the games. And I honestly couldn't tell you what happened. Oh. Still, there's some army dudes, and they go on some missions and shoot some people. But I'm going to take you on a journey, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm going to take you on a journey because there was one mission where I decided, fuck this game. That's mission 2. Sorry, there's not many missions. Like,
just want to tell you at this point, Rich has pulled out
a piece of A4 paper, Faz.
A memo of kinds. This is wonderful.
So point by point, like combat bits in this mission we're going to go through, right?
Oh,
I should have done PowerPoint slides. I know I said I would make this episode shorter. I'm not.
I want length.
Oh yeah, this is 45 minutes in. This is going the distance.
This is fine.
Okay, so you are in Vietnam.
Yes,
you are, and you got to free some CIA analysts, right? Hostage types that have been silly enough to get captured in the last days.
Make them the agents.
Sausages,
give them guns.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty compelling argument. So there you are, right? You break into this compound. You got 2 guards in front of you with their backs to you, because if you're guarding an outdoor space, you stand facing the door you're guarding, not where
nice and laps like I want to be. I would be those guards.
Yeah, like it was bold. I think it was a bold tactic. It didn't work. So this mission's timed, right? None of the missions are very long, but this one has a timer. So you've got to get to the hostages before they get executed, right? So you've got an unskippable cutscene to start with. It's Call of Duty, so it's first person, and you see some hands like getting past a fence, and then you're in the thing. Get used to seeing that. You're going to see it a lot. Then you go to shoot the guards. the sound of the gunfire will lag.
Okay.
It'll be like trying to play online in about 1996. So you'll pull the trigger, and then there will be a distinct gap, and then your gun will fire multiple bullets to keep up with the fact that you pressed the trigger. And like it's almost like running to catch up with someone when you're in a shop and they've gone down the aisle, and that's what your gun's doing. But you get the first couple of guards down. You go into this room. You've got pillars down the middle of the room, a few guards to your right on the floor. You've got some stairs on the left going up to a balcony.
Okay.
So you nip round the side of the pillar, you shoot the 3 guards, and on Call of Duty, I don't know about you, but one of the first things that springs to mind for me every single time is that really crisp movement, right? Mm-hmm. And you can snap to targets and things like that.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're John Wick sometimes, right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly on for multiplayer mode, for example, like isn't when you're in Kill House and stuff, and or Shipment, like you can just get that done rapid and feel great about it.
Exactly. You are rampaging through these levels like an oiled panther.
I've got so many images in my head. Like I feel like I'm watching Hot Shots Part 2, but now I've got oiled cats.
Yeah. So with this one, it's not so much oiled panther. It's kind of like
Steel Panther?
No, more like watching a beloved grandparent slip on a bar of soap. So you can go around a corner and you can shoot these 3 guards pretty quick. And it's like, oh yeah, that feels like Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Then you spot a guard up on the balcony, so you dip behind the pillar, only you keep going. and you sort of take one too many steps past the pillar, and then another guy at the top of the stairs starts shooting you in the face. So you go to step back behind the pillar and you take one too many steps again and come out the other side, and it looks like a shit dance routine, right? So you go to shoot the guy on the balcony, only you can't snap to him because it's just his head. And
his head glitching you.
It's just not quite getting there. So okay, you charge up and you barely manage to get them. You go around a corner and there's 2 more guards that are just sort of waiting there. I guess they would have heard the gunfire by this point.
I hate it in the games where it's just like
there.
I mean, even the greatest games of all time, like GoldenEye, for example, guards, that happens where it's just they haven't quite made it so the AI are ready for you. But then even GoldenEye, I think most of the guards are on alert after you start shooting in certain levels and stuff.
You could kite them around a little bit.
Yeah, it annoys me so much when it's like, oh, that's a round the corner section. That's not none of our business, Clive.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, let them have it out. We'll just go in with the tea and biscuits when they're done.
Yeah.
That's basically what is happening here. They're waiting for you. So you're like, oh shit, there's some more people here. Who knew?
Who'd have thought?
So it'll go one of 2 ways. Either you can shoot them and move on, or as happened to me one time, one of them just charged straight for me, ran past me, and decided to go and stand on a table. Which is an interesting reaction to mass murder, but each to their own, I suppose. I've never been in a gunfight, so I don't know how. I might stand on a table.
Yeah, some people do it down the pub.
So you deal with them. You nip into the next room, and it's one of those classic Call of Duty situations where, for some inexplicable reason, there's about 7 of them in a relatively small space surrounded by crates.
They've just set it out.
I don't know what they were doing there, if I'm being honest. There was a partition, so I think one of them might have been doing clerical work, but I'm not entirely sure.
I want to know more about him.
Exactly. He's got an interesting story. The people you're playing as do not.
Maybe he's part of Papers, Please, and he is a border guard.
Interesting.
That would be great.
Well, he's dead now because
he's dead now.
So it's that classic Call of Duty grenade bait situation, right? Yeah. So you throw a grenade, you nip back behind the corner, and you wait. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the grenade goes off.
No.
At least, and I swear, at least once, it just didn't go off.
AAA game, and you're throwing explosive, and it's not doing.
There was just nothing doing. It might have gone off, but I just didn't hear it, and the audio glitched out. That is a possibility.
I mean, that's still shit.
It's still not great because you're kind of relying on that to know whether or not you should be moving on. You still get the crosses in the middle of the crosshair when you hit someone, but there was nothing like that. And given the size of the space and the number of people in the room, there's no way it didn't hit someone. Someone was getting caught. So in the end, I just sort of kept putting my head in and out and trying to coax them into chasing me, which worked.
Yeah, obviously.
So you move on and you go through. There's another couple of little bits where you're either fumbling with the touch screen or trying to hit guards through little gaps, and it's just not working. Like they're either like the time to kill in Call of Duty games is always quite short. In this, and I don't know if this is accurate, but it always feels to me like in single player it's a bit more calibrated to give you a bit of a fair chance to feel like a big damn hero, whereas in multiplayer it's really, really short. It feels like they kept it on the multiplayer shortness for the single player.
Right. And
it kind of feels a little bit like you have that kind of arcade, like false difficulty going on, where they just went like, oh, this is too easy and too short. We're just going to have to make it really difficult. And every time you go back to the start, the timer restarts, that you have that unskippable cutscene again. You keep going. And you get a couple of interesting set pieces through the course of the story. And one of them is this bit where you go through a window and, some of the hostages you've got to rescue are below you. And you get to smash through a skylight and do the kind of COD BLOPS, classic where you go into a room and everything's in slow motion and you're like, yeah, take him down and take him down, take him down. And it's like, yeah, I feel like a badass. The problem with this, a couple of problems with this.
Sounds.
So, do you remember back in the day when you're playing something like... GoldenEye or something like that, you'd have certain guns that could shoot through glass, like the Magnum and stuff like that, and it would feel like, oh, hey, like, the glass is like something I can interact with.
The environment.
Yeah, exactly. So you go through this skylight, and there's a couple of shards of glass falling with you. You can't shoot through them. They are solid. More than once, I was robbed of being able to free these hostages by bits of falling glass. Too close to where I'm aiming.
What year was this game brought out?
I think it was like 2012 or something like that. And it's just, you will go through this window. You might be able to hit something while you're falling, in which case, well done you. Or you might there was one time where I think I bounced off the table you land on or something, and I veered left while I was trying to aim at something. And all sorts of weird stuff could happen in the space of this fall.
Okay.
Which, considering the number of times I ended up having to restart the mission because of something we'll get to in a minute, I promise. It was just frustrating because I thought I had my kind of method down and, I was compensating for the, let's say, quirks in the movement and the shooting. And yet there would still be something getting in the way that felt like it was out of my control. Assuming all goes well, you've rescued the first set of hostages, the timer resets, and this time it's only 40 seconds. You're like, oh, wow. Flip, I better get a wiggle on.
Yeah.
You go around a corner and there's another set of guards in the same room that haven't reacted to you falling through this skylight and shooting 3 of their friends in the face.
They just sat playing poker.
They're just
watching.
They're not even sat there. 2 of them are walking in. And look at you, and they're like, "Oh,
this seems like a chill room." Is this where the sheesh is getting passed around?
And there was one guard who was kind of cunningly crouched underneath a kind of interior windowsill. And I just there was one time where I took 10 seconds of my 40-second limit to just sort of watch,
just see what
as he
was
fired
doing.
Repeatedly into the bottom of this window while staring at me. And it was like if you've annoyed someone and they're staring at you but punching someone else in the face,
This is what I could be doing to you, but I'm not, but I will.
And it's just baffling. So you move on. There's a couple more guards in a hallway after that occasionally they might turn and run, and you're like, oh, I think I'm actually shooting them in the back. It's like a hell of a time for them to show some initiative. So you feel sort of bad about that, and you're they had ample opportunity. And so this next bit was where I was like, fuck this. So you go into a room, and that 40-second time limit is so you can get 2 rooms over into this room that you've got in. Like, how slow am I meant to be going? And there are a group of 3 hostages in front of you. It's quite a big space, and then on the other side of them, 3 more guards.
Okay.
one of those hostages, when you start shooting, will stand up. Every time.
I feel that's quite realistic, though, in a way.
He was sat on the floor, right?
There's always a wanker.
If you were sat on the
There's
floor...
always one that deserves to die.
If you were sat on the floor and someone started shooting over your head, would you stand up? Or would you try and lay further into the floor and possibly dig yourself a hole?
I wasn't saying I was the wanker. I'm just saying there is one.
There's usually one.
always one. I mean, certainly taken from Hollywood films, there's always one that freaks out and flails about, and they usually get shot. And that's fair.
I mean, I tell you what, it would have been more realistic if they'd popped in like a little voice line, like one of the hostages stood up, turned at you and went, "Is that a Mac 10?" And then you shot him in the face. That would be more plausible for how this guy was acting. The number of times I had to reset this mission because of that guy. Oh. And then I worked out that all I had to do was step right.
Oh, yeah.
I'd take one step right, and it's
you
clear...
had to change to the game's mechanics.
Exactly. I wasn't playing it the game's way.
Yeah.
And that is an important point, because when I started playing it the game's way, me and the game got on better. I'm not going to say we got on well. We got on better. And then once I was finally past that, and I don't know how many attempts it took, once I was finally past it, I was like, yes, finally, I can finish this mission. And you go around some stairs, there's a couple more guards, and then you're on this like runway, and you get this call over the radio. It's like, they've got MiGs, you've got to like use your mortar. And it's like, oh, cool, I got a mortar. Oh, right, I pressed the touch screen, and I pressed the touch screen again to mortar the planes.
Oh, it's a Sims 2 situation.
It's like a kind of point and click, like thrilling end to the mission. Where you just tap the plane markers on your screen
precision airstrike
and they blow up. And the kicker with this was after I did that, I was like, okay, cool, so I guess that's the end of the mission. Oh god, there's one of them on the runway. There's a guard on the runway and he could still kill me.
No.
And I genuinely panicked. And it was the most tension I got. Because, it's like all of this, and it's like, I've finally made some headway with it.
And there's random grunt.
There's one guy who actually could drop me. And as it so happened, the mission finished before either of us could shoot. So it was fine. But the point is that all the way through this, with these bite-sized missions, and they are bite-sized, it comes up at the beginning and the end like a kind of time played kind of thing.
Okay.
And in total, it was just over 2 minutes.
Oh.
To do that entire mission.
Yeah.
Once I'd actually got my method down and managed to execute it properly.
Yeah.
2 minutes. And there's maybe like 10 missions. And so when people say that the game is short, yeah.
Now, I'm going to stop you there. I would put it to you that sounds like an arcade game where you do something over and over and over, and the difficulty is there to stop you from completing it first time round.
And funnily enough, I agree. And that's why I got on better with the Hostiles game mode, because that's, wave-based. Once you've got to grips with the game's idiosyncrasies for how it is going to handle things like AI and shooting and floaty movement and things like that, and you're playing it on its terms, you're much more in the realms of, okay, well, if I go here, I can defend this space, I can make it to that care package when it comes down because I'm standing here, I know it will spawn over there, I can make that in 8 seconds and I can get that care package. If I've got the right weapon, I can go here. If I've got the wrong weapon, I can go there.
Yeah.
And you can start to approach it with that arcade mentality. And that is where I started to have a bit more fun with it.
Okay.
However, by a bit more fun with it, I mean I maybe added on about an hour of gameplay.
Fun.
Yeah, and then it became frustrating again because the waves got too difficult too early. And by that, I don't mean like a kind of, oh, woe is me, I'm not playing it right. I mean, like, the enemies are psychic. They know where you are at all times.
Yeah.
They will shoot you in the face, and you will die in about 2 hits.
Yeah.
Like, it was just getting frustrating.
I always found that happens with Call of Duty Spec Ops, though. That is in it just ramps up all of a sudden. It goes from having, like, a few random grunts who don't know what they're going to 16 juggernauts, and they are homing missiles, and you're like, shit.
Yeah, like it's one of those ones where it does ramp up like very, very quickly, but then because you have to unlock each of the maps in Hostiles sequentially, so you've got to get like a 1-star rating at least before you can unlock the next one. So the first couple are fine. You stand a good chance. It escalates sensibly. By the time you get to the 4th one onwards, maybe it's just rock hard from the jump.
Right.
And that's where it started to lose what little traction with me it gained.
Okay.
You know, finishing the story, such as it is, like, sure, it does kind of plug a couple of the gaps with COD BLOPS 2, but not enough of them to really feel like it was time well spent.
Yeah.
So I can see what it was trying to do. I feel like if it had been called anything else except Call of Duty, people might have been a little bit, you know, more welcoming towards it, or that's probably the wrong word, a bit more forgiving maybe. I think certainly nowadays the price it commands second hand is because it's a Call of Duty game. I think I read somewhere that some people are still playing it online. More power to them if so, because I can't help but think that if you've got real people you're playing against and not AI, I think that would make a big difference, because a lot of the problems I was having was because of the AI. I don't think the maps sorry.
No, I was going to say that point, and obviously you've said previously how much you enjoy bot matches, so therefore to have a bad experience like that and not have it, you know, like Unreal Tournament, for example, it's like you are there for that to be good, and it sounds shit, so therefore that is not good for you.
Yeah, exactly. For what I want from the game, it wasn't giving me what I was hoping for. Because I like, if Hostiles had slightly better balanced AI and things like that, slightly better maps. The maps are very like dry, very blocky.
Okay.
You know, there's not much interesting stuff going on.
Yeah.
Certainly the AI is not good enough that you feel like you can be clever with your defenses and things like that, or any.
Get in the corner.
Yeah, like there's not much sort of tactical opportunity. The best bet is to just keep moving and shoot quicker than they can.
Yeah,
which, when they are, you know, literally robots, is easier said than done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, I think overall for me definitely a swing and a miss, but I can see why people would get some enjoyment out of it, but I think it would be limited.
So I want to say that your memo on this game was possibly 10 of the best minutes of my life. I really, really enjoyed hearing your pain and suffering.
Oh, good. I'm glad it was worth it.
And how you described it. No, but in all seriousness, like, you painted a really good picture. And I said before the pod, I didn't want to play it because you're so good at reviewing these games. And actually, I can see what the level's like from how you described it. I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass. That was a really good description.
It was working
though. But yeah, it almost in a way in my head, I'm imagining a game that's a bit like Super Hot, that isn't trying to be super hot.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's not far off. Yeah.
Guys come from all angles, getting stopped by you just ducking behind things, and the AI kind of having to react to your timings of stuff, and blocky and weird, but it's like, but you're playing Call of Duty.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good way of looking at it. It's like if you took the interesting time mechanics out of Super Hot and dropped them into a Call of Duty game. You're not far off. Yeah.
Unintentional Super Hot.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we're talking arbitrary figures...
Oh, yeah, we are. Wait, that dude that was sat there doing the clerical work, he wants to know what this number is. That's what he's been waiting for all his life.
I don't think he wants
to know. So meta, isn't it?
That
he's in the game right now waiting to hear from you what score you're going to give it.
I don't think he's in the game anymore. I think his loved ones might be out there wanting closure, though.
Well, your grenade didn't...
The number of times... He was one of the few guards I had to kill several times.
Okay,
so he's
so
definitely gone.
He's gone.
Yeah. I think for me, from what I played, I'm going to go 3.
Okay.
3 out of 10.
Yeah.
But
I'm hearing a 3.
If you are accessing multiplayer and getting some fun out of it, you know, locally, say, if you've got some mates around, I could see how that could get up to a 4 or a 5 relatively easily. But for me, yeah, it's a 3.
So it's not so bad. We don't think it's... Do you think it is the worst game on the Vita then? I mean, I know you've not played every single game on the Vita, but can you imagine... There must be worse games out there than what you've just described to me.
There's definitely a couple that I've played that I like less.
Okay.
And I've had less fun with.
Yeah.
However, and this is a pretty big however, I wouldn't have paid full retail price for them.
Right.
And that's the kicker. I think if you bought this day one, I think you would be understandably annoyed.
Yeah. I mean, it's all relative, isn't it? Like, how much you pay for a game, like what you expect out of it.
Yeah.
Like, But then at the same time, if you're paying £12 for Shovel Knight and it's one of the best games you've ever played, you should at least expect a pretty good game for a £40 or £50 game that you get in from what is normally a AAA title.
Yeah, I don't think it's much to ask, and I think especially Call of Duty as a franchise, that name carries weight. Rightly or wrongly, it carries weight.
You release one every bloody year. Do you know what I mean? Like, you should be able to do it properly.
Yeah, I think it's not unreasonable to go in with expectations of a certain level, and I wouldn't have said this game met that.
And the power the Vita carries, you'd think they'd be able to do that. And it annoyed me when, not you personally saying it, but it annoyed me when you said, "Oh, it's a handheld game. It's stripped back." I can understand maybe the PSP or a DS version or something like that, but the Vita is so strong in how it performs.
Yeah,
You'd think you could get a good Call of Duty game on there, a full experience of Call of Duty on there, make it work.
I think what was kind of telling for me was where I mentioned about picking up this PlayStation TV before now.
Oh, yeah.
You can't play this Call of Duty on that, and I think I would have had a better time with it had I been able to play with like a DualShock 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it wouldn't have been a great time, but it would have been better. To the person who bought the Vita recently and might or might not be looking for advice on picking stuff up, skip Call of Duty, buy Killzone Mercenary. Trust me, you'll thank me for it later. I will do a review at some point, I promise. Killzone Mercenary is the game that Call of Duty should have been. It feels more feature rich. From what I can remember and from what little I've played more recently, it plays better. It was, to all intents and purposes, for me at least, one of the killer apps for the Vita. Call of Duty had bags of potential. It could have got to that sort of level, and it simply didn't.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's very in-depth description of what I would describe as your Odyssey. Really.
I mean, it did feel cleansing. I feel lighter.
I don't after this Honeybadger. I feel full of mead. So, and we said this week we were going to run short on this pod, but I'm having too much of a good time to allow that to be the case. So, sorry, listeners, if you're thinking, I'd listen to this pod if it was a bit shorter. You're
sorry.
Go away. Yeah, get in the sea. I don't care about you. So, I do want to finish off a little conversation we're having about wide-ranging conversation we were having about learning games. And the one thing that I want to ask you about Vita games, do they have manuals, physical manuals?
No, but I'm pretty sure there was at least one person who was like making them.
Yeah, that's a thing. Point. Yeah, a thing now, isn't it? People make manuals. Yeah, and stuff, don't
there's all the cartridges and like the big Vita releases have a digital manual that you can access on the console, which is useful. I do quite like that. However, they were still doing the thing where the bulk of what was in it was like the safety information rather than actual useful mechanical stuff. But a lot of them do have information on the cartridges, but there wasn't much, if anything, in the way of physical stuff.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm asking that question because I know the PSP has manuals, and some of the games I've picked up just disc-only games, but I've also picked up some with boxes. And for example, I picked up Final Fantasy. Can't even speak now. Sorry, Mead. Final Fantasy Tactics this week from CEX. I refuse to say sex. I will not lower to that level. But yeah, so it's the most expensive game I guess I own now. It was £15. I traded in some Xbox One games for it because I'm a cheap bastard. But I thought I'm going to get I guess what I say, air quotes, everybody, there we go.
Nice.
It's an expensive game for the PSP now. Most of my games I picked up for mostly between £2 and £5. This one was £15, but it has a manual in there, and the manual is, just like you said, very in-depth, like the Baldur's Gate situation. It's probably, I'd say it's like 30 or 40 pages. And you can see, and I read an article this week about manuals, how somebody who used to produce manuals, and it's a bit of a lost art, but he used to have a system where it would start off with, this is how you play the game, the very basics of the buttons, this is how you play the game in terms of the tactics of the game, and then this is the meat on the bone of the story of the game, and the characters, and all the characters would always be at the end, and the reason for that was the development of the game, because they would usually play a game that was in development and it wouldn't be necessarily finished, and the artwork wouldn't be finished, and also the story wouldn't be finished. So they would always leave that to the end to write that part at the end.
Oh, cool.
And he talked about that for a Crash Bandicoot, for example.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting to see this in play with these manuals where... And I was thinking to myself in the shower this morning when I had my most important thinking cap on, because I don't have a shower cap because I'm bald. I was thinking, do I miss manuals? Do I need manuals? Do I not need manuals? Are they an important part of gaming? And because I love retro gaming, I'm like, oh, maybe I should have manuals, and they are important to me, and they give heft to a box, and it's nice to learn a lot around a game and stuff. And what you were talking about the Baldur's Gate example before, that sounds brilliant, and it probably even influenced your D&D playing life now and
Absolutely.
things. But do I actually need a manual, or do games get me through now with tutorials? Do they get me through with enough sort of ease me in? I'd say they probably do, but
Yeah.
It makes me sad there isn't something inside the box.
For me, a lot of the time it was for reading it on the way home.
Yeah.
Like that was part of the ritual of getting a new game, was reading on the way home. In fact, I had a day off recently and went over to York and shout out to Sore Thumbs and picked up a couple of Saturn games from there. Had a great time reading through the manuals on the train on the way home.
That's an interesting point, and you talked about holiday previously, and this is the last story I want to share because we are running really long here, but it was to do with being on holiday as well, and I remember picking up I don't know if I've shared this on the pod already, my Game Boy Pocket from Newquay. So I drove from Carlisle on the English-Scottish border, by the way, to Newquay. It's about a 9-hour drive.
Hell, yeah.
Which, any listeners in America or anywhere else are probably like, oh, we do that every day. But in our country, it's a pretty lengthy drive for us. So we drive down there, have a 2-week holiday, and drive back. I remember I picked up my Game Boy Pocket down there after a massive blag of my parents, to the point where I was like, guys, I'm not living another day of my life. I'm not breathing another breath until I get Pokemon Yellow. It's not happening, right? Okay, I just can't do it. Like, probably through some sort of 13 or 12-year-old, whatever it was, tantrum. Like, as in, I just had to have that game, and I had to have that console. Everyone else that I had it, I just loved Pokemon so much at the time. Got it. And I remember having that and reading the manual for the first hour on the drive and thinking, I have to imbibe every single ounce of what is in this case. I have to read this entire manual. I have to live and breathe this. And it was impossible to put down because I was just... But then I knew the game was sat there waiting to be played, but I was like, no, I need to have all this information inside me first to feel like I'm getting that full experience. And it must have meant something to me because I remember it so vividly now, and it makes me feel warm inside. And also, I'm very car sick, and I was like, but I'm still going to read, and I'm still going to play on this game. I don't give a fuck if it makes me feel ill. It has to be done because that's all I feel with it as a being that I need to do right now. And I probably got to Viridian City maybe in the first 8 hours because I was just like grinding away on my Caterpie. Like, come on! Especially when I learned Brock. I needed Butterfree to beat Brock.
If you haven't
on
got
Pokemon
confusion
Yellow.
on Butterfree.
Yeah. Oh, Pikachu, do something useful. No wonder Ash struggled so much in the series. That he had to cheat his way into beating Brock.
I think they cut out the month that you spent stumbling around the forests.
Misty was so sad. But yeah, anyway, so I guess manuals are really important. But to me, probably when I was younger, I don't feel like I need them now, but it's nice to have them back in my life again with getting some new PSP games, and also my PS3 as well. They've got manuals in them too. So not every single game does, but they do have some. So which is interesting. Because I thought they'd gone by that point, but actually it's intermittent by that point.
Yeah, I think that was when they were kind of on the way out, because I've got a similar thing with my Xbox 360 games.
Yeah.
But I think they were definitely of their time. I get why nowadays, there's a lot of like cost and environmental concerns that go with printing stuff.
Get it down. Bollocks. Right, okay.
But also game tutorials.
Pulp paper,
right?
Come on now.
Game tutorials nowadays are way better than they used to be.
Yeah,
right?
okay. Yeah.
Like, sure, you have attract screens on arcade games and things like that. But generally speaking, if you're on a console, you pick up something nowadays, just in terms of design, they are better at easing you in. Arguably the pinnacle might have been, World 1, Stage 1 on Super Mario Bros. Back in the day, where it's like, you don't have to know what's going on to just instinctively pick up that pad, those two buttons, and, walk right and jump a bit. But nowadays, there's a lot more moving parts. They've got to be better at teaching you, and a lot of time and effort has gone into making them more approachable, which is why it's so frustrating when they screw up.
Yeah. And I think that the point of tutorial, for example, when we played on Uncharted Golden Abyss, I felt that was so far in your face, though, that tutorial. It was just like, these are the mechanics, and obviously we discussed at the time, it was probably just to get you used to using all the parts of a Vita and all the sort of touch screen, etc., and the back screen as well. But for example, games that do it well, like Battlefront and stuff, that is in, some of those games get sort of badly reviewed at the moment, but certainly like the World War One and World War Two ones, I remember like the tutorials of feeling like you were in a war, and actually you were developing almost like as a rookie in the war, and it's like, but this is how you do this is how you dig this hole or whatever, or this is how you use this dynamite and stuff. Actually, some games do it exceptionally well and really immerse you in the experience of the game whilst giving you the tutorial, and you feel great about it. So it can be done easily without a manual, like you say, and make you feel like you're really enjoying the game at the same time.
And that's the trick. That's the modern trick, is that immersion.
Yeah.
And if you can not do what Uncharted did on the Vita and just slam the brakes on, and that's what it was. It was just an absolute pace killer.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely an art to managing these things and getting people used to learning the ropes.
Yeah. Cool. So I think that brings us to the end of the episode. So this is our learning games episode and how you learn a game, and Rich's emotional breakdown about COD BLOPS, which I still think sounds like something bad has happened to you in a bathroom after a
It does sound like something that you would go to a doctor for.
Yeah.
Or McCodbops are playing up. Incidentally, we're still very much learning how to make a podcast. So if this is awful, let us know. Get on the socials. Let us know.
I don't believe you. I think it's fucking fantastic. Right. So thank you all very much for listening. Again, please do check us out on our Instagram and our Facebook. And you can find all of the different places you can get our podcast on our link tree. Thank you so much again for all the feedback we get from everybody so far. It has been brilliant, and we absolutely love having you guys listen to us. So have a lovely week. Thank you very much.
Cheers.